Please welcome this evening's guest moderator from IndieWire, Eric Cohn, and tonight's guests, writer-director Angus MacLachlan, and actors Paul Schneider, Melanie Lynskey, and Audrey Scott.
Gives you a pretty good idea of the sort of setup for this movie. I want to jump into this with you, Angus, because you're not exactly what one might call a newcomer to the filmmaking business. I mean, from Junebug to movies like Stone, you've been writing for a long time. You're also a playwright. So this is your directorial debut. To put it frankly, what took so long?
What took so long? Well, finally I got a little luck, maybe. That's what I think it takes to get a movie made these days, particularly an independent film, any films. A little grace actually finally happened, and the right combination. I had another project that I'd written that we couldn't get made because it was kind of big, and so I wrote a script that I thought could actually be made. It was mostly people in a room, and then I found some producers who agreed, and then finally we found some money. So
it's a very funny movie. It's a very honest movie. It's, in certain ways, I think, more liberated than a lot of studio versions of that premise of a man and his wife sort of having a falling out. But from your perspective, I mean, what felt fresh about this particular situation? Because clearly there are versions of it that have been told before.
Well, one of the inspirations was a movie from the 70s called An Unmarried Woman, which was about a woman who was married, whose husband unceremoniously says, I want to leave the marriage, and she has a child, and it's about her going out dating again and standing on her feet. And it was about 1978 or 79, and it was really about the women's movement and women's consciousness and how women had to, sort of assume that they can have everything that a man can have and that they can stand on their own and not just be just a housewife. And so I actually said, could you maybe do that with a man who somehow is unconscious, and tell it from a man's perspective, and how he doesn't know what's going on in his marriage, and suddenly it falls apart, and he gradually, through the movie, has to come to some kind of consciousness through his relationships with these other women that he encounters, and his daughter, played by Audrey.
What was your way into sort of understanding the conundrum that your character faces, being sort of blindsided by his wife being unhappy?
Well, I feel relatively blindsided by life every day, and so that wasn't necessarily a stretch. I mean, the script got to me, and I did see an unmarried woman, but I mean, the script was so relative in a way, like it's. I mean, like I feel like we all sort of feel like this, I feel like we all, I feel like our relationship to our emotional sort of topography is always surprising to us. I mean, the way you're saying it sounds like there was like a real puzzle to solve, and the reason I related so much to the script, although I've never been married, it just seemed like, these are situations that we've all in some way, shape, or form have been in. And they were all fully realized characters. And, like Audrey said, I don't think her character was sort of oblivious at all. In fact, she revealed to my character some of what it is that he was doing and the emotional impact of what it is that, of those things. So, each one of our characters, I mean, I don't want to speak for Melanie, but each one of the characters I've found when I read the script was sort of like fully realized, and there wouldn't be that much inventing that needed to be done.
Right. No, I think you guys are pretty much on the same wavelength there. And Melanie, for you, I mean, it seems like you often do play these sort of alienated characters who are I mean, it's a good thing. It's something that a lot of people shy away from, but I think that you do it quite well. And there's something that's very interesting about this character in the sense that a lot of the journey that she goes through takes place off screen. So I wonder how much sort of you had to bring to the table, or that the two of you sort of had to collaborate in terms of fleshing out what happened there.
Yeah, we were lucky that we had a rehearsal period. So Angus and Paul and I talked about it a lot, and we had a whole history. And also I was very fortunate in that Paul and I have known each other for 10 years, maybe? Something like a really long time. So, like a really long time. So we have a history together already, and we're very comfortable with each other. And there was some stuff in the script that was a little frightening for me, some sort of emotional stuff, and I knew that I would have to really trust the other actor, and I knew that I could get mad at him, and it would be fine. So there was a lot about it that felt comfortable. And I don't know, I go on sort of an emotional reaction I have when I read a script, and if I feel like there's something in me that's present and can be worked out or can service the story in some way, then I'll agree to do it. So it probably doesn't say anything good about my state of mind most of the time. I'm like, yes, I can be that damaged person, yes.
Well, Angus, I mean, you've put words in characters' mouths for years, but was there anything that was surprising to you about the actual rehearsal process, from a directing standpoint?
No, not really. I've done a lot of theater, and I'm an actor myself and was educated as an actor. So actually the surprising thing is how you don't get any rehearsal. I mean, we were lucky to have them for a few days before we started shooting. But on the days when we actually shot, because there's a lot of different characters that come in and are not in the film for a long time, so most of the actresses would come in for 1 or 2 days, and you would have no chance to really rehearse. But I had a lot of discussions beforehand with all of the actors about who they were and what was coming from. And because I'm an actor, I write for actors and I think like an actor, so I'm able to, like, if they are struggling and say, well, I don't understand this, or where did this come from, I can say, oh, it's because this happened, and I will make it up. But they came so incredibly prepared, all of them, that it was easy. I mean, in a way.
Now, we're going to show a clip in just a second here, but I want to ask a question about comedy, because it's not a situation that when you describe it to somebody necessarily inspires laughter. So what's your sort of approach to writing humor around these kind of scenarios? I mean, Junebug was also a movie that, wasn't overtly hilarious per se, but there were a lot of funny moments as you went along.
Well, they're the kind of, I feel like life is like that. I think life is funny and horrible at the same time. And they're the kind of films that I like the most that have both of them, and the kind of actors that I like the most who can be incredibly real and funny at the same time. So comedy is a funny thing, because if someone doesn't get it, like read it off the page and doesn't understand it, there's no way to communicate that something could potentially be funny. And you're always kind of stepping off a cliff, because it all comes just from your own inner sense of what's funny or what the rhythm might be right. But all of the actors seemed to get it, which was great. And even some of the roles that aren't funny, like I think Melanie is incredibly funny, as anybody who watched 2.5 Men knows. But her role in this is mostly serious, but there are some parts that I think are really funny, just the way she does it and the way the line reading. And that sensibility means that, to me, that an actor really understands life in a certain way, or shares an understanding of life that I have. And certainly Paul and Audrey have that too. Audrey, is kind of remarkable at her age. She's a real actor. There are a lot of children who can just kind of imitate, but she's really there. So again, a lot of it is the act. Of course, then we had Amy Sedaris, and she's like, a whirling termagant of comedy, and then of course, it's what was interesting to me is how much you can construct in the editing process in terms of the rhythm of what's funny and what's not.
So let's take a look at a clip.
See, hilarious, isn't it?
Real belly laughs. So Paul, it's a really simple 2-shot, and yet I think we get a lot of different sort of ranges of emotion, just sort of with the sort of tics, facial tics and stuff like that. How much of that just sort of happens? Are you thinking through a lot of those details, or does it just sort of flow out of you?
Everyone is mapped and forethought is given. And actually, the lemon thing was mine. But so that was acting. I didn't get lemon juice in my eye. But I thought that's something that life might do to Otto. He's sort of like, he bumps into life and life sort of bumps back. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, like, I generally am uncomfortable on film, so it's not a stretch.
Melanie, you've done a whole bunch of different kinds of styles of acting. I mean, most recently I saw you in a movie at the Sundance Film Festival called Happy Christmas, which I think was almost entirely improvised in certain ways. So is there a particular mode that you feel like you're most comfortable with? Or, I mean, do you like all these different styles?
I like doing a lot of different things. It's just sort of more interesting when you get to mix it up. But honestly, my favorite way to work is the way that Angus works, which is where he's very clear about what he wants. He has a script that's in place. But if you feel like you might want to add something, you can talk about it, and maybe that's appropriate. You have a lot of sort of creative freedom. He's not the kind of director who's like, then you go to the cupboard and then you get this thing out and then on this line you walk over here. That's when I start to freak out a little bit. So it's kind of the perfect balance of feeling like you're very safe with somebody, but also feeling like you can do whatever you want.
But he and other good directors and other good human beings are the kind of people who are going to allow people into the creative process. I mean, we're all there to throw ideas around. It's a big brainstorming session. It's a collaborative event. Actors who feel like they have sole authorship of their performances are deluded. Because there's this thing called editing. And I studied editing in film school, and I turned bad performances into good ones. So it's hard, when I hear actors talk about some kind of, auteur feeling about a performance. I think that's ridiculous. But, I mean, what happened on set here and what Angus brought to it was, sometimes if an actor has an idea, you throw them a take, like throw them a few minutes, you can just try out a take, try out an idea that you have. And what might happen is that, that might not be a take that you use, but that actor feels included in the collaborative process, and he will work with you and for you, all day, every day, because he feels included. Because he's going to make his presence known in a positive way. Now, if you don't include an actor or you don't include, a team member, they might go ahead and make their presence known in a negative way and have a bad day and stay in their trailer and fight with you on every point that you make from then on out. So you can either collaborate in a positive or negative way, but either way, an actor is going to validate him or herself.
And Audrey, you've done a lot of movies for somebody your age. What was it like for you to go through this collaborative experience?
Well, I had a great time making the movie, and working with everybody was just amazing. And like Paul said, we do have some free reign over the characters, but they were nice to work with, and the characters themselves were fun to portray.
I want to ask you, Angus, about sort of going from, writing, let's say, more sort of multi-layered stories to something like this where it really is, you're talking about 4 or 5 major characters. Was there something, liberating about that process of sort of scaling down a bit?
I don't think I don't see it as very particularly different from anything else. I will say, though, that the most satisfying thing about becoming a director was that you get to fully communicate your idea to the end of the process, because you don't write a screenplay just to be read, you write it to be experienced somehow in time and space. And when you're just the screenwriter and you give it to a director, you can have a wonderful experience like I did with Junebug with Phil Morrison, who was, fantastic to work with, and we saw things in the same way, and I loved the way the film turned out. And then I've had other experiences where I didn't feel that. But because I think I am an actor myself and I've directed on stage, I have an idea of how a scene should be played, and I want it I would love to see that done. And so then when I became the director, I could communicate that to the actors, and then finally also then construct it in the editing facility later, so that you really, it's what you imagined finally happens. And again, if you're lucky, it comes out in a way that's pleasing.
All right, so let's take a look at another clip from the movie. So we get to see a lot of stuff going on there, relying on Amy Sedaris to some degree, I think, to really deliver the comedy in that scene is seems like a smart gamble on your part. I'm thinking about, seeing her and Paul together in that scene, and sort of how all of you guys seem to do projects that kind of hover on the edge of, let's say, the more mainstream side of things, but you're not doing a lot of big movies, and I wonder, what sort of your relationship is and your feelings are about, bigger opportunities and more mainstream commercial projects, and is that something you've ever wanted to do, or do you prefer to do these kinds of smaller things?
Oh, I turned down a lot of work.
Sure, all those superhero movies.
I'm lucky that they let me in the building here today. I mean, I'm so fortunate that I got this done. I think there are some great big Hollywood movies, and who knows? I mean, I'm really sincere in saying that I feel so fortunate to be here with these people I've admired their work, and I got to work with them and got a film that actually got made. It's just fortune. So I have no idea what the future may bring, but they're great. People always say, I will say that when I wrote this script, I gave it to my agent, and she said, nobody's going to make this movie. It's maybe if you lived in the 70s, you might get this kind of film made, but not now. And she was sort of saying that there are not a lot of large Hollywood movies that are really sort of about these kind of human stories. And she's right. So that's a little too bad, but there are some that get through and that make a lot of money. So.
And Paul, you've also directed and acted in a wide range of projects. So do you relate to some of what Angus is talking about here?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of like small or big, I mean, a story is a story, and if you feel strongly about wanting to be involved, and I mean, I think there's a misperception about me, especially, people talk about like I've chosen well, or like the projects I've picked, I mean, I don't, I get scripts every now and again that I think are great and I would love to be involved in. And then I bust my ass auditioning and trying to get the projects, and most of the time I don't. And so this idea that I've picked anything is kind of interesting. I mean, like, I certainly am discerning, and if anything, the one tool I have is the tool to say no to things I think are shitty. So, if I have any kind of resume, any kind of quality to my resume, it's probably more because I've said no to things that I don't want to be in than yes to things that I do, because I've got a couple of things working against me. One is that there aren't, you're not seeing a lot of scripts coming at you that have financing. And then I have my taste, which is not like mainstream or not mainstream or big or small, but it's just, I like what I like, and it's not really based on anything besides just a kind of a simple response to a script that I don't fully understand, and I don't feel there's any worth in trying to figure it out.
Melanie, it sort of straddle this interesting line, because you do 2.5 Men, which is very much a mainstream piece of entertainment, and then in the last few years you've been doing a lot of really interesting smaller indies. So I mean, what's it like sort of to be in those two places at once?
It's a weird thing. I feel very grateful. First of all, I feel very grateful that 2.5 Men let me out of my contract, so I'm not like owned by the show, so I can do independent movies. That's a really nice thing, and it's also a weird thing, because I do feel like I live in two sort of different worlds. Like, people will, because I'm not really on 2.5 Men anymore, so I'll be recognized from that show, and people will be like, "Are you still acting?" Like, what happened to you? Are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. But it's sort of an interesting thing. And like a lot of people, you know, I remember one time I was on the set of an indie movie and some extras were kind of talking and the director was like, what are they? And I said, they said they recognized me from 2.5 Men, and he was horrified. He was really upset. He was like, I didn't know you were on a sitcom. And I was like, well, sorry. I guess you wouldn't have given me the job, so I'm glad you didn't know. But it's just, it's weird to be in two different worlds. But, you know, it's really hard to make a living in indie movies, so...
But it's funny, there's if you were on a show and now like a on a big network and now you're not, there's some perception that things went horribly wrong. And if you want to be involved with films, that your face has to be constantly pumped and splashed into every media outlet, and the minute there's a dip there, I mean, heaven forbid you don't want to be, like your image like splashed all over the nation or in every media outlet. And it's funny because actually maybe getting off of a television program is things going horribly right. And getting back to movies like Angus's film is like things going fantastically right. So I feel like our culture is definitely, if you're not constantly kind of like being shoved in people's faces, things that it's something to be pitied, when in fact I think it's something to be lauded.
Well, we've covered a lot here, but I know there's probably some questions in the audience, so why don't we turn this to a Q&A?
So you're talking about this, the dramedy elements of the film. Can you talk about those moments when you might have been able to play it more comedically or more seriously, and how you made decisions to do so or not, or did you try it both ways and then you had to make the decision, Angus, to keep it or not keep that performance?
The words drama and comedy, I don't think enter into it. You know what I mean? Like, I know for myself, and I assume my coworkers feel the same. We're kind of just playing each situation, and it's the accumulation of those situations that would create a category that we're talking about. I know that for Otto, Angus and I sort of created parameters with which we feel like he might live, and I'm trying to give him options, but those options are governed by the character parameters that we've set, but also trying to respond honestly with my coworkers, because I've got to listen to Audrey and what she's expressing to me, and listen to Melanie and what she's expressing to me, and if I'm thinking drama or comedy, well, I'm not listening. So, does that make sense?
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, me too.
You talked about how tough it was making this film, and that this kind of film would normally have been made during the 70s. How did you overcome that challenge? How did you make a 70s film now?
Again, I'd have to say it's luck, I mean, I finally found some producers who liked it enough to try to raise some money, and then I finally talked some people into giving us some money. And hopefully you have a little bit of a track record. I mean, I've dined out on Junebug for now 9 years, so I mean, I'm sort of on the back of Phil Morrison and Amy Adams. I mean, their talent and their successes, I can say, well, look at this. This is a good movie, and here's my new one. Will you at least read it? And that usually gets me in the door to be read. And I have to say that the backers of this film, they knew that film and they loved it, so they were open to maybe taking another chance.
This question is for the cast members. What was it about the script and characters that attracted you to the film? I know Mr. Schneider already touched on this a bit.
I think for me, it's kind of what I was saying before. I just have to feel, just something weird happens to me when I read it, and I just feel like there's something in here that I need to work with right now. I need to express. And I think I maybe was the first person who was attached to the movie, and a couple of times I had conversations with Angus about playing another character, like another one of the women, and I just couldn't see it. Like now I watch the movie and I'm like, oh my God, Lara's so amazing, Debbie Spangler's so amazing. But at that time in my life where I was emotionally, this was the only role that I could see myself doing, and it was like really, really cathartic and good for me.
I have to agree with you on the little feeling that you get when you're reading about the character and when you're reading your parts of the script. I really liked the character of Edie when I read the audition and when I read the parts of the script that I was given that had my role in it, and I liked how some things about the character were similar to me and how some things sort of proposed a challenge, and I loved it, so.
As far as approaching your backers are concerned, did you have any other material besides a script?
I'm sorry, I couldn't
Did
hear
you
you.
use any other material besides a script when you approached your backers, or was it just your experience and the other work that you had done?
Yeah, mostly, and then just trying to convince people that this would be a good project. And there was no actors attached when I went to get money, so it's not like I could say, look, Melanie Lynskey and Audrey Scott and Paul Schneider and Heather Graham are going to be in it, which a lot of times you do. One does, attach actors, and then that makes it very attractive. But this was just completely, fishing, night fishing, where it's like here, try to believe in it and make that leap of faith.
On average, how many takes was it every day, and how many shooting days did you have?
I'm sorry?
How many takes for each scene
how many
on
takes?
average? And how many
I think we
shooting
had
days?
21 days of filming, I think, over 4 weeks. And then we would have maybe 3 or 4 takes, do you think? Do you remember? Not a lot, but, and everybody's always, I didn't feel we were really rushed, I think time is always relative. I've never directed a film before, but I know in theater, everyone's always like, oh, if we could only have 1 more week of rehearsal. Everyone always feels that, whether you have 2 weeks or 6 weeks. And this one, it would have been nice to have more time, but I didn't feel like we didn't get anything, and I certainly didn't feel from any of the performances like I really needed another day to get that out of Paul Schneider. I never had that
I felt
sense.
that way.
Thanks, guys. And thank all of you.